Alright, so hey, how's it going? We're going to be looking at Living Language Ultimate Japanese Advanced, and a couple things I want to get out of the way first. This is actually the second book. The first book is in beginning to intermediate, and then you see here advanced, so this is the second volume. The first book is good. It's all Romanized, which is why I don't have it here with me. I actually left it overseas for that reason. But it's still a good book. I think they do introduce some characters, or at least the hiragana and katakana, so I think towards the end of the book a little bit more. I can't remember exactly since it's been a while since I've seen it, but that one's 40 lessons and this one's 20, so there's a little bit of a difference there. And they cover quite a range of topics. It's going to be set up fairly similar to this book. Lessons aren't particularly long, but they're detailed, and we'll see that here in a second. This book, the advanced course, is in case you're not really interested in learning how to read and write Japanese, and you're just interested in learning how to speak. You can do that with this book. You don't need to worry about learning the characters. They're in here if you're interested in learning them in the second section, which is in the back of the book. And another thing I wanted to note here is that this particular series, because they do have other languages, not just the Japanese book, or Japanese, but this particular format with the red here, the blue, and the white, I think this is a little bit older. I don't know if they still have these in publication. As you can see here, this book's, kind of old and worn out. Page is torn here, the cover is torn here, and the little, it's like, I don't know what this is, laminating, I guess, is peeling. So, yeah, it's an older book, and finding the audio was not easy. That's another thing, there is audio for this, but it doesn't seem to correspond so much to the text, so that's one of the main downsides I want to get out of the way first, too. So even if you can get the audio, I think you can find it online, because, like I said, I don't think this one is in publication anymore, so you'd have to pretty much look online or buy some really overpriced used CDs, but yeah, it's not, at least from what I've listened to, it sounds like they kind of rephrase the texts, and then, or the dialogues, and then you kind of listen to it and you can understand what's being said, but it's not a direct reading of the text. So that's maybe that's just what I have. Maybe that's incomplete, or maybe there's something wrong with that. Maybe they really do, and that's just what I got. But there's also, like I said, this is older, so they have a different series from the same publication, which covers beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And I think it's like one box. I don't know if that's the same thing, like if the dialogues are the same, or what's up with that. That might be different authors, so they might actually be a fully different series altogether, even though it's part of the Living Language series. So yeah, I don't know about that, so I couldn't comment on that in case anyone's wondering. And what was it? There's one more thing I wanted to mention about the CDs. The CDs all have a lot of English on them, so that is the downside. So outside of that's the most negative thing I can say. The series is probably not anymore in publication, and the CDs have a lot of English, so the dialogues don't seem to match up, but that's about it. It's actually a pretty good series. So go ahead and start out by looking at the book. This is a map of Japan. Kind of nice to have when you're learning a language, get an idea of where it's spoken. So that's the introduction. Here we go. So the book, after the introduction, has a table of Japanese syllables, Romaji, Hiragana, and Katakana, and nicely detailed. A good way to practice. A good overview, excuse me. And I'll go ahead and start with section 1, which is the dialogue. So this is the format. It's the same format that's used in the first volume, the beginning to intermediate. So if you can see here, you get the lesson is all Romanized. So the first part of it's in Japanese. Afterwards, after the Japanese text finishes, you get the English translation. Go ahead and zoom in so you can see that a little better. Quick note here. So you'll see here 7. I don't know if you can see that. So you'll get little numbers throughout the text, the Japanese part of the text, and that follows, or that corresponds to the notes section, which directly follows the English translation. and the numbers obviously correspond to those numbers throughout the text. And it's a little like asamil in a way. Underneath the text, you have, or throughout the text you'll get numbers, and underneath they correspond to certain little notes about the grammar and whatnot. And I would recommend looking through these. Let's see. It's actually got a lot of good... misspeaking, excuse me. They have a lot of good information that's things that I don't always see in other books that I've studied Japanese with, or that I haven't really noticed, or that I've actually wondered about, like, why is it said like this? And I've found that to be pretty helpful myself. After that, you get section C, which is grammar and usage, and that's a little more in-depth about the grammar. They're usually not that long, which is kind of nice. They give you some, well, you can see here, idiomatic expressions. It's kind of nice, especially with a language like Japanese. Afterwards, you get into section D, which is going to be, well, in this case it's about business matters, but it's usually like a cultural note about Japan. And you see it's kind of a little bit of a text. That's actually 2 pages, so it's a lot of information about how you should interact with the Japanese, what's considered appropriate, inappropriate, business matters, cultural notes, just stuff like that. Useful tips. And then afterwards you get a short set of exercises, not really that hard or anything. And then the next dialogue. What's more interesting to me, though, is, I think for a lot of people, is this particular section here, section 2. Bookmarked it. There we go. So, kanji, hiragana, katakana, English. There's not really a lot of English. So, this is a direct repeat of the first dialogue. However, it's all like it would be written in Japanese, except for those of you not familiar with what hiragana is, let's see if I can get it to zoom in properly. So you can see here, on this kanji right here, it says oai ni naru sou desu, right? So you can see here, this is a kanji, this is a Chinese character. Above it's a little symbol, little character, that is part of hiragana. So those make it so that newer kanji, or kanji that are more difficult, are legible, that they're readable. And so that's going to be the case for all 20 lessons that are written in Japanese, is that you will get the hiragana with them as well. So you'll always be able to read them as long as you can read katakana and hiragana. And so yeah, it's kind of useful. And if you have trouble too, you can always look back at the, go back to the first dialogue, just to give you an example. You can always go back and it's the exact same thing, but romanized. Typically what I'd recommend doing, though, once you get to this part, is to actually keep a bookmark on the same section in the first section, the same chapter, the same lesson, in the English section, and then compare it with the Japanese section when you have trouble. Also, another thing about the Japanese section, where it's all characters, they actually don't do the notes, since they already covered that, the notes and the grammar, since they were already covered in the first part of the book. And so you have to flip back. But afterwards you get a vocabulary list. I don't think they have that in the first part of the book, but that's because here they use characters. Let me double check though to make sure. Let's see them. Nope. Yeah. Well, they're assuming, by the way, if you're using this book, you probably already have a fairly good grasp of Japanese, or at least at intermediate level. So that's why I think here they only really put the vocabulary for the characters and the character section. And they also give you characters, as you can see here too afterwards. Go ahead. And they'll give you some of the readings and examples. So here's how to read it. Nan, or nani, what. It gives you an example. Nanen, nanjin, and ananin. It's a difficult part about Japanese. It's very easy to misread some characters. Let's see. So yeah, and then there are some, exercise. There's a couple of short exercises afterwards. And I think I didn't quite catch it on here. So a couple of short exercises afterwards, A and B. And yeah. And then you get to the next dialogue, same thing. But every 5 lessons is a reading exercise. And actually, I find these to be pretty well done. These do not have any hiragana, so that's kind of nice. It's the reading exercise you can see here. 日本語学習者ものと敬語. So, probably misread that, I think. 日本語学習者と敬語. It's about the polite language and people who are learning Japanese and the polite language. It's kind of a cool thing about Japanese, by the way. Even if you don't remember how to read the character or you don't know all the readings, if you understand the meaning, and you can pick that up from seeing it repeatedly used in different contexts, you can actually figure out what's being said or what's being written, I guess would be more accurate, just through looking at that. So that's actually really nice about Japanese. And after these reading practices, by the way, because they do introduce new vocabulary, you get a vocabulary list. Go ahead and look at that. It's a pretty good size list. And then it starts the, you can see over here, the 6th lesson after that. So like I said, every 5 lessons. I don't believe these are actually included on the CD either. And they're not included in the first part of the book, which is romanized. Because, again, this is a reading exercise, so that wouldn't make any sense. And I think this one here was a misprint. If you can see here, Dewa gaikokujin ni, and then it's like an exact repetition of, I think, right here. Kind of funny. Yeah, and then afterwards, of course, there's a glossary in the back. So let's see. But that is all romanized. It's not using characters, and they give the English-Japanese one. Real quick note on the reading area. I think there are a couple times, in the reading practice area, excuse me, I think there have been a couple times where I'm not 100% sure on how to read something, and I forget maybe where it's introduced. Because there is no hiragana, if you don't remember, that can kind of get you into a little bit of trouble if you don't know how to look up a character. Because the book's not designed for looking up characters. Like, most books won't be unless it's specifically a kanji dictionary. So that might be something to be careful of. But they're pretty good about listing most of the vocabulary. I think if there is anything that is missed, I think it's more an accident. Or it was something that was covered earlier. But there have been a couple of times where I can't think of how to read a character, and I've had to ask somebody who is Japanese to help me with that. So that's not going to be too big of an impediment with this book. It is really, really well done. So yeah, that's the Ultimate Japanese Advanced course, and I really would recommend it for anyone interested in learning Japanese. It's really, really well done, and they introduce you to a lot of characters and a lot of reading in normal Japanese. So yeah, it's a good book.